All right. Well, welcome to someone who I already feel like I have a lot of resonance with, Savio P. Clemente. So grateful to have you today. And you and I had a few rescheduling back and forth, and I'm just really glad that we found each other in this moment in time. So, what I usually start with is how does it feel to be in your body on this planet at this time?
Z, thank you so much for inviting me on this podcast. What a beautiful prompt to start off with. I think in the moment, I feel empowered because I think a lot of challenges that were thrown my way was about learning to lean into the physical. So right now, it feels comfortable. And the majority of my life, to be honest, felt extremely uncomfortable.
Yeah, I get that. I'm super, super delighted. Like, I just want to take a moment and cheer for us both that we found a way to get to this place where we could feel comfortable in our bodies. It really feels so special. So when would you say was the first time you realized you were uncomfortable in your body?
I think as early as 3 years old.
Yeah.
And it's been a struggle to I always felt like I had this innate power inside of me, but I was never I never could outwardly express it in the world. Like
Mm,
I did things. So I wasn't like a shy, I mean, I was a shy kid, but I wasn't like someone who was like a recluse. I did things, I hung
mhm.
out, always felt that I wasn't comfortable in the physical shell that I was born in. And it's not gender, it's just living a physical existence. And I don't know why 3 years old seems fitting, and it might coincide with the fact that that's the age that I came to the United States. So I was born in India,
Okay.
um, and I don't know if it's but that's since you asked me that question, that's what
Yeah.
pings to me at the moment.
Yeah, so you moved from maybe what was like your, first world, that comfortable close. Was there any other big changes? Like, was there a significant like decrease in family? Were you around a lot of like extended family and then was just with nuclear family or anything like that, like city, country, or
Yeah, it's so interesting because I do not remember anything before the age of 3. I don't know if
yeah.
I subconsciously blocked it. I mean, it wasn't hard. I mean, it was, it was India's a struggle, especially back in the late 70s, but um, I don't think it's that. I just don't recall it.
Yeah.
All I do recall is just being in kindergarten or being on the playground, having those experiences, just feeling like I was a fish out of water
Mm.
and I just needed to find my ocean.
Oh, it's so beautiful. Yeah. So you had that awareness, like something is not quite right here. And how did that discomfort like manifest in those early years?
So I had a stuttering impediment for the majority of my
Mm,
elementary school. My dad took me
mm,
to the doctor, and I remember distinctly he's like, I see nothing physically wrong with your son or even psychologically wrong with your son. He did some evaluations, but he did ask an interesting question to my dad. He's like, who does he hang out with? And my
hmm.
dad's like, he has a best friend named Francesco, who's from Italy. And he said, well, does Francesco have a similar situation? And believe it or not, Francesco did, like even worse than me. And
Huh.
he told my dad, he's like, are you sure your son is not like mimicking him or mirroring him. And
Yeah.
this is back in the 80s. So the language wasn't
Wow.
really there. And
Right.
my dad obviously couldn't even understand what he
Yeah.
was even kind of saying.
Yeah.
But in retrospect, maybe I did. I don't know. But I do know one thing that in high school, I didn't have the issue. So I had it for the majority of 8 years in Catholic elementary school, but I didn't have it in high school. And it popped up from time to time only when I got nervous in
Yeah.
college. So
Yeah.
I don't know, and I don't know if it was a survival mechanism for me as well. It could have been that.
Mm.
And if you believe in astrology and woo-woo things, I'm a Pisces, Aquarius cusp.
Triple
Uh,
Pisces over here. So get you.
so maybe it was
Gosh.
that as well. I don't know. But
Yeah.
that was the first recall that I can think of that I felt like I existed, but
Hmm.
yet my true home wasn't here. It's
Hmm.
so odd and it sounds weird. And of course, I never verbally express it to anyone. And honestly, I don't even talk about it generally. So thank you for opening the door on that discussion. It's beautiful.
I'm glad you brought it up. I am a person who I'm connected with extraterrestrials and all the woo. And yeah. And when I had my first like face to face with an ET, they were like, yeah, you're not from here. And I was like, thank God, like it didn't make sense for so long. I knew I was not from here. This place is so weird.
So,
Oh
100%.
my gosh.
I always felt, to a large degree, growing up, it just seemed so primitive to me. And that's not a judgment. It's just what I felt.
Yeah.
And of course, then the other question would be, well, what are you doing trying to make it not primitive, right? Of course, as
Hmm.
a young teen, what am I going to do? But that's how I felt. And so I
Yeah.
have to be honest about the feeling.
Yeah. And I don't think it's as uncommon as we're led to believe.
Yeah.
I end up, you also are a coach, and I end up in sessions with folks that ultimately get to this, like, I've never felt like I belonged here. And whether that's because we're highly sensitive or because of our astrological chart or because we're actually extraterrestrials, it doesn't really matter, because what we have to confront is that feeling of like, I don't really know how to do this. And what does that mean? I'm curious. My actual previous life was as a speech pathologist
Okay.
in public schools. So
Wow.
I've actually interacted with stuttering and kids a lot. I'm curious, you said maybe part of it was a survival mechanism. In what way do you think it served you?
So I'm the youngest of three kids. I have two older sisters. We're all 3 years apart.
Mhm.
My parents, so I was born in Mumbai, India, but my parents are from Goa, India. So most
Mhm.
people, when they see my name, they're confused. Goa was ruled by the Portuguese for 400
Right.
years. So I just always felt, even from that identity perspective, like I was Indian, but not really, because people were like, does your mom wear a dot on her head? Do you eat rice every day? Do you? And so I think for me, I just learned to try to integrate and
Mhm.
assimilate very, very quickly. I think part of it is really the survival mechanism, right? I didn't want
Mhm.
to be considered another. There was a friend in high school who used to not tease me, but say from time to time, he's like, you're like a nomad. And now that
Mm.
I've studied various belief systems, I grew up Catholic because the inhabitants of Goa, most of them are Catholic. Um, I probably was a
Yeah.
wanderer. So he
Yeah.
probably picked up on some level of just
Yeah.
my fierce independence. I had like
Mhm.
massive independence, even as a young child. I wasn't a latchkey kid, but my parents worked hard. They showed love through food and hard work, like most immigrant parents do, or most parents do in general, actually. But I think for me, I just felt different,
Mhm.
and I couldn't really talk to my immediate family about it. And college years just opened the doors. I went to school in New York City. Um, if I even tell you the story, what happened, it's just unbelievable, because that was
Tell
like my
me.
first. So I went to school in the heart of Manhattan at Fordham University at Lincoln Center. So they have another
Mhm.
campus in the Bronx, but I went there. It was like 20-story building, literally right by Lincoln Center. Juilliard kids were there. And the majority, not all, but it was a liberal arts school, but the majority of kids there were like theater majors. So it was like that was my first foray into like dramatic, like, sensitive, highly engaged people. And, most of them actually thought that I was gay. And I wasn't really out at the time. It took me about a year and a half, but it was just so taxing on me because
Hmm.
I felt like they were judging me. So the aspect of survival, how do I had to like increase that survival mechanism to such a degree that I didn't really know how. And
Mm.
it's so interesting, Z, because I was in a room my freshman year with three other individuals, two people in each room.
Mm.
I woke up, so my roommate wasn't there. I picked my side of the room. I woke up the next morning. He's on full on drag. And I'm like, okay, this is interesting. That was my
Like,
first
hey,
time meeting a gay
yeah,
person. Okay,
yeah.
this was the late 90s. Okay. Then I meet this other guy named Mitch, full on lisp, gay guy. Another guy was listening to Bette Midler. Like, oh, I was like, another guy. I'm like, if the universe, I
I was
swear,
just gonna say the
did
universe was
not.
like, we're gonna help, buddy.
And it's really odd because you're thinking like this is typically what it. No, I was the only one. And I
Oh,
really believe that if I didn't see the different facets
yeah.
of what it is to be an openly gay male, then I don't think I would have come out as quickly as I did, because I probably had feelings and I could probably do a hypnosis session where those feelings were probably prevalent there, but I didn't have the language or the articulation or the
Mhm.
know how or even the courage to even confront it. And I really believe the universe showed me
Yeah.
in very, very quickly.
Ah, I love that so much. I feel like in every story that I hear, there ends up being this moment where it's like, and then there was this divine like shepherding that's like, here, let me just help a little bit. I don't want to help too much. It's like this big sweet grandma being like, come on, honey. It's just amazing. And I wonder, like now, of course, reflectively, you can be like, wow, that really opened doors for me. That really gave me permission. That gave me to this ability to see this spectrum of realities within which I could, be a queer person. But at the time, were you a little like, whoa, too much?
I was, because people were judging me. They
Yeah.
felt like I used my, back in the day, stereotypes were huge, and it was like a limp wrist, or I would have like a female sounding voice, a high
Yeah.
pitched voice. And honestly, my grades the first year suffered because as much as I loved the experience of being away, I wasn't like, I was actually the opposite. I wanted to be away. It
Yeah.
was more of, how do I handle people's judgment of me?
Hmm.
And it was really a friend who also was gay that I met, who had a crush on me, which I didn't know how to even handle, to be honest, said to me, we went to a bar in New York City, and he was so pivotal. He said to me, look around. He goes, all these people just want is love. That's it. So it doesn't really matter what your expression is. It's just, they're just looking for love. And it's so basic, but so beautiful. And it was just really a light bulb moment. I'm like, oh, that's right. It doesn't really matter,
Not
does
this
it?
big, weird, complicated thing.
No.
Yeah. Oh, Savio, I love imagining you waking up to that roommate and having this moment like, ugh,
Yeah. And
ugh,
the thing with me is, it's like I was always like open. I never, like, I didn't want to move out. I didn't have any of that, but it was just odd,
yeah, it's
and
like,
um,
okay.
but it was beautiful in that sense as well. And sometimes they say if you're given the hard knocks early on, it makes life seemingly easier. And I really think those were the building blocks for me, to be honest.
Yeah, yeah. I had a therapist once tell me like your queerness is what like maybe didn't feel great at the time, but it like forced you into ownership of self
Yeah.
earlier than most people have to, which ultimately is a gift. Uh, so I'm so glad that you had that little nudge from the universe and you got to have that experience. Wow. Okay. So your early years, you were maybe trying to connect with the stuttering as like because a peer had it. So like a way to fit in, and then sort of navigating like, what does it mean to be gay? And how do I do that? And how do I let all these people have all these different opinions about it? So what were like those next couple of years in college into early adulthood like?
So it was mostly it was just very comfortable. I came out towards the end of my freshman year, early sophomore year. I didn't room with those individuals because it just wasn't a match generally. I had other individuals that were just, it was, you know what? It's New York City. It was the 90s. Like, come on. It's like things happen. People, it was like the grunge years. People did stuff. Didn't really matter. But I grew up in a small suburb in New York. It's called Westchester County. It's about
Mhm.
40 miles north of New York City. And if you ever remember the show Facts of Life, I'm dating myself here, but it was taking place in Peekskill. I grew up in that town called
Oh
Peekskill.
my
So
gosh.
it was this little town. And there was some interesting people in high school, and I was like friends with a lot of different people. I didn't really care. But I remember in college, actually, I'll tell this story, that one of the other roommates that I roomed with my sophomore year said to me, he goes, you're hanging out with this guy. He's like, you're hanging out with a lot of gay people. Are you sure that, because he was closed-minded. And I'm saying this because this is how people think, right? He's
Yeah.
like, are you sure that's not going to rub off on you? And because I wasn't
Mm,
out, and
mm,
it's just, and I took offense of that, obviously, because I'm like,
mhm,
they're just people, right? At the end of the
mhm,
day,
mhm.
if you
It's
don't
not
want to hang out with them,
catchy.
yeah, you don't want to hang out with them, you don't have to. So really, so the way it worked, so the rest of my college years were beautifully and wonderful. I was able to assimilate and do really well. And I graduated with an information systems business administration background. I worked in the .com. Then I also was a casualty in the .com boom, and also the bust that happened with the .com era. And then 9/11 happened.
Ooh.
And I worked for many different companies in the interactive space. And then I joined 300 individuals on a quest, like a production company, to do something spiritually focused. We did that for many, many decades. I put a lot of my heart, soul, felt like a passion project. I put my own financial resources in it because I believed in it. But truthfully, there was just cracks internally with the individuals themselves. And once again, didn't have the courage to tell them it wasn't working. And
Mm.
I might be fast forwarding here a little bit, but that's when cancer entered my world in 2014.
Wow. Oh my gosh. I want to know about so many of those things that you just talked about. Um, but I really love what you said is that you didn't have the courage to tell them that it wasn't working. And courage can kind of be framed as a like, especially with queer folks, like a get the courage or be brave or have pride or whatever. But I like to think of courage as sort of like what your body allows at any given time, right? And it just depends so much on your personal history, on your ancestral history, on maybe Akashic record level history,
Mhm.
right? That like you didn't have the courage because you weren't meant to have the courage, in my opinion. Like you couldn't have had the courage. It wasn't for lack of like showing up for life, right?
Yeah,
You were
yeah.
obviously, you know, did your coming out experience. It sounds like you went on a big spiritual journey. You didn't even speak to what coming out may have meant in terms of family
Mhm.
dynamics. So you had a lot of courage. But having that play out in specific moments or in specific situations, um, it's easy to look back and be like, shoulda, woulda, coulda.
Yep.
But on another level, I wonder how you experience that, like, okay, the not having the capacity to meet that moment in that specific courageous way was what gave you perhaps the opportunity to experience the cancer.
Yep.
Could you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. I can even talk a little bit about the family dynamics, like you said, of coming out. So I told my parents, I think 5 months or 6 months after I came out.
Wow.
They come from a very traditional Catholic Indian background. I remember giving them a book, and they never
What
read it.
what book did you give them?
Oh gosh, it's a really good question. I don't remember. All I remember, it was the most popular book on a child coming out
Yeah.
of the closet. I don't even know the
Was
title of
it
the
was
book.
it by chance Love Ellen?
No, it was not that. It was
No.
not
Oh
that.
my gosh,
No,
that's the one
it
that I
was
gave my
it.
parents.
It had to have been.
I love that we
It
were
was
we
it
gave
was in
them books.
1995. So it was some book in 1995 that, and they didn't read it.
Right.
And I had my cousin actually help me. I came out to her. I was very close to her. There was
Mm.
something about her. She just was someone who's just extremely open-minded, and we just got along really well. We actually ended up taking a trip to Greece like a year before, so I just felt very comfortable with her.
Thank goodness for
And she,
her.
yeah, she talked to them a little bit, but they just didn't have the framework to
Nope.
understand. And I don't even think, to a large degree, it's gotten extremely better now, right? 20 some plus years later, but I don't think they had the language to understand
Yeah.
I think initially they thought that I wanted to be a female, like I wanted to
Right.
dress like a female and all that. And then, I mean, people have even asked me, actually, someone asked me a couple years ago, they're like, what about your parents now? And I said, honestly, I'm not in a relationship. It just hasn't happened. I'm just going to say it like that. But I think for them, it's like, what does that actually mean to them? Right. It only
Yeah.
means something if I say, I'm marrying this guy or I'm having a baby with this person.
Totally.
Other than that, what does it really mean? Doesn't really mean much to them. I think at the end of the day, parents do want us to be happy, even though they can't understand what that happiness entails. And it's
Yeah.
like my mom still is confused. I'm a journalist, and that I'm a coach. Like she doesn't quite kind of get
Yeah.
it. And now I'm a TEDx speaker, and she's like, "What's that?" I mean, she knows, but what I'm saying is she doesn't know that that's could be a career because they're
It
into the
doesn't fit
tradition.
in a box of
Absolutely.
the expectations. Yeah.
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 100%. And so for me, beyond that, yeah, the last couple of years just generally has just been exploratory cancer. Like I told someone, I would never classify it as a blessing, but Z, it opened up a whole world I would have never even intentionally gone through,
Hmm.
that I was to a certain degree forced to go through.
Right.
And I made a decision after 5 years of being in remission that I would do something with it. And this is what I've chosen to do. And it's been a ride. It's been a huge, beautiful ride.
Yeah. Well, going back to the body thing, feeling uncomfortable in that body, trying to navigate what does it mean to be in a body as a gay person, parents' expectations, all those things. And then cancer, it sounds like, put you even further into contact with what it meant to be in that body.
Yeah.
I love how you frame the inner stranger. Can you talk about sort of like before that became like a helpful anecdote, like
Yeah.
how did that start? Because I bet it at first wasn't quite that beautiful.
No. So it actually dovetails beautifully to this conversation because the inner stranger was what happened to me in 2014. So the way cancer came into my life was fast and furious. I was on a trip with a friend, that same friend who actually told me, look
uh
around. Yeah. We kept in touch. We had our issues and problems throughout the years, but we kept in touch. And I was on a trip to Paris, London, and Amsterdam with him. And I just kept having these drenching night sweats. And I was like, this is odd. Came back to the
mm-hmm.
States. I still had them. Then my stomach started getting distended bigger and bigger. I had some
Mm.
respiratory issues. At that point in my life, I was only seeing a naturopath for about 8 years. He would analyze my
Uh-huh.
blood work. He would tell me what vitamin structure to take, what to eat. And he goes, my friend, Savio, there's a few things this could be. What I suggest is that you go get a sonogram. I'm like, sonogram? He's like, a sonogram. I'm like, okay. So I get a sonogram. They wouldn't let me leave the office for an hour and a half. They finally came out and told me to have a relative pick me up. And I'm like, what are you talking about? I have a car here. They're like, nope, relative come pick you up, take you to the hospital. I'm like, okay. Go to the hospital. Within an hour, they admit me to the 5th floor. That same night, I heard nurses speaking that they're going to transfer me to the 7th floor, which they call the cancer floor. And that morning, they ended up putting a nephrostomy tube in me. At that point, they distended about 8 liters of fluid from my abdomen, and it was ascites. And the guy whispered in my ear that it's stage 3 DLBCL, which is diffuse large B cell lymphoma. But he did say to me that if there's a cancer to get, which was odd, this is a cancer to get. He's like, we
Mm-hmm.
have biologics that can help you with this, so you still have hope. And it was only in the course of understanding what just happened to me, because when cancer happens, at least for someone like me, the way I'm built and the way I think is it's a challenge, focus like a laser beam, put everything else to the side and seek healing wherever it is. If it's a
Mm-hmm.
doctor, that's the healing. If it's this, that. And so for me, it's only years later when I learned and did my trainings and I learned that courage lies in the stomach. And where was most of my cancer? In my abdomen. The I had it in my abdomen, which was so interesting. So it all now in retrospect makes sense.
Oh my God, full chills. Have you heard of German New Medicine?
No, I have
Oh
not.
my God, I'm gonna send you this
Okay.
teaching that
Okay.
my friend just sent me. It's like literally they mapped out cancer
Wow.
according to like emotional
Oh,
um whatever
yeah.
is emotional like disconnects.
Yeah.
So I bet it would resonate so much. And I was so curious now to go look at the stomach, but courage is in the stomach.
Yeah.
Jeez.
Yep. And I was bedridden for a week because of that nephrostomy tube.
Yeah.
And then I was in the hospital for 6 more days, 3 days before the doctor came. The medical director came to me and said to me, let's have a talk. She goes, I know you're someone who doesn't even take aspirin because to be honest with you, Z, before that, physically, I was doing the right things, working out 6 days a week, spinning, strength training, and boxing. I was eating organic food. I was meditating 20 minutes a day. I was doing all the quote unquote right physical things, right? But other things in my life were not going so right. And she
Mm-hmm.
said to me, I know you don't even take aspirin, but I'm telling you right now, if you don't take your first round of chemo before you leave this office, then I don't know what to say. And that's when I relied on a really wise friend of mine who was part of this partnership. And
Mhm.
I told her this, and she said to me, "Are you sure you want to take chemo? Because it ravages the good and bad." And I actually had to pause because at that point in my life, she was literally the wisest person I've ever known. Like, I mean, like deeply wise. And I swear to you, it was another flash of insight from wherever.
Yeah.
It was this movie that came to me, and I talk about it in the TEDx talk, which dovetails into this idea of the stranger.
Yeah.
And it was a movie starring Keanu Reeves
Mhm.
as the Buddha, called Siddhartha, the young Buddha, and it's called Little Buddha, the movie. And in it, he's meditating with two other ascetics. They're probably living on 1 grain of rice a day or maybe a week. And he overhears two individuals on a fishing boat, one older, one younger. The older
Mhm.
individual has an instrument, and he says to the younger person, "If you hold the string too tight, it will snap. And if you leave it too slack, it won't play. The path is the middle way." And I'm like, oh my God. So I can do this chemo thing. I can leave the hospital with this, but I can do other things. And so I did 6 rounds of chemo, 1 round in the hospital, 5 other rounds every 3 weeks. And in between those 3 weeks, I did a whole panoply of things from ozone medicine to energy medicine to red light therapy. I was still working out. And I really think it really saved me from having some of the side effects. I had a little bit of neuropathy, but I had a great appetite. I lost all my hair. I kept it now as a badge of courage on my head because it reminds me of what I've been through. And
Yeah.
that's something that I can never forget. But the inner stranger really was that person. It was like that physical body of mine dying, but my
Mm.
mental acuity was still there. I was like Googling, I was setting Google alerts, I was reading all these research papers on my cancer. My emotional body was alive. Like I had 4 other roommates. I cared about their own welfare. 2 of them had brain
Mhm.
cancers. My relationships with the people that who knew about my cancer, like my family and friends knew, I was still invested. My dreams were vivid. My spirituality was still alive. Obviously, I got that insight as well. So I'm like, how do I pull this stranger, this dying thing happening to me? How do I pull that? And in between all that, which I know you love, and Brene Brown will probably have a field day, was these things of shame and vulnerability. And people don't understand unless you've been through it, but that's what cancer did to me. It allowed me
Mhm.
to feel in the shame. I had to accept it because I felt like
Mhm.
I created it. I fucked up. People will judge me. I didn't finish what I came here to do. I believe, as you do, that this is just a vehicle for our expression, our soul expression. But I'm like, did I just screw things up here? And so that was the shame. And so that was my stranger. Other people have voiced their opinion to me since my TEDx talk and said, the stranger is like that person. It's not the inner critic. It's not the inner child. It's that person who they want to be, but they just can't seem to reach. And
Mm.
a friend who's into Buddhism said, the stranger to me is my past life. It's the thing I can't shake off. It's the thing that I can't overcome a karma.
It's the
I
karma.
exactly. So that was the stranger.
Yeah, it's so many different like, we're all trying to make meaning and clarity in this very confusing game that we're playing. And so it's like one term can mean 12
Yeah.
different things.
100%.
I have a kiddo and he's about to be 13, and we were talking yesterday in the car about something, and I was like, yeah, I mean, words just have different meanings. Like, because he was like, that is not what I'm talking about. And I was like, well, that's what I understand that word to mean. So we just are telling different stories all of the
Right.
time and then trying to match on
Mm.
them. But I love that moment where you were able to like really see the rigidity, which can come with following any philosophy, whether it's like, I'm gonna be totally spiritually free and not fit in with
Yep.
the culture and do my own thing. Even that can become a dogma.
Yep.
And so
100%.
you were able to like look that in the face and be like, I'm gonna disappoint you by not following your whatever it was, no chemo dogma,
Yeah.
and I'm going to give myself permission to do this whole hodgepodge and throw everything that I can at this. And that kind of radical permission, that sounds like courage to me.
Thank you.
Yeah, to be able to say, I may be breaking some rules, and I'm going to allow that. I feel like shame can't stand up very long in that kind of a framework.
Yeah. Beautifully said. And I think it was my inner knowing to a degree because I didn't even understand what I was doing. I knew that I needed to do it. And that's when I reframed the chemo as an elixir. I saw it as a therapeutic. I saw it as as mana from the universe. I saw it as a gift
Mm,
rather than a poison that's going to eradicate the cancer or kill or
mhm,
destroy. I
mhm.
knew that. And I said, okay, well, I'm good with this because people said to me, weren't you scared? I said, of course I'm scared. No one's going to say they're not scared to die, but I'll be honest, I'm not afraid as to what will happen after this because
Mhm.
I really believe that there's something else happening that will happen. But I was more afraid of I didn't fulfill my tasks. I didn't do what I came here to do. I don't even know what that was, to be honest, but
Yeah.
that was the underpinning. And so even though I trusted that wisdom, as you know, truth only becomes a semblance of something greater is if we
Mhm.
find evidence in that truth. Otherwise, it's
Mhm.
just truth. And
Yeah.
so I just knew I had to test that for myself. And so I tested it.
Yeah. What do you think that was that like I might not be able to fulfill what I was supposed to do?
I think I've always sort of known that I'm going to share this with you because I don't really tell a lot of people. And now all your listeners will know as well.
Thank you.
When I was really young, I just knew for myself, even though I didn't understand, I grew up in a very Catholic upbringing and they don't talk about past lives and all that. I just knew that this life would be a tough one. And I'm
Mm.
not saying that I created that because I know people now will say, well, he created it. No, I didn't. But I just knew that this would be a tough one. I just knew. And so I said to myself, just hold on, have fun, do what you need to do, right? Experiment, do all these things, which I did, by the way, because that I'm just a curious person. I was like my early 20s. I took a trip to Sydney and Melbourne by myself. Like no joke. That's how I roll. But I also know about guardrails. I'm like, as long as you have the guardrails, then
Mhm.
you're good. And so I just knew for myself that but I said, other than that, I just knew that
Mm.
this would be a challenging one for myself. I just knew it. And I never really expressed that to a lot of people. So thank you
Yeah,
for
thank
allowing me to do that.
you. Yeah, I love to hear these precious little nuggets that don't always come out because there's not, you know, not the space or the question or the context for it. So thank you for sharing.
Sure.
Um, so in the awareness of the okay, this is going to be a tough one, there there also like a and it's going to mean something and it's for a purpose.
Yeah, it was almost like it was going to be a tough one, and I couldn't express what that divining hand is, but that's how I felt. It felt like it was going to be a tough one, but a- and we're all guided. I don't care who you are. I don't care if you believe in something that's not, I don't care, whatever. But I always felt that even though it would be tough, that there would be a divining hand in that
Mm.
helping me, right? As long as I do my
Mhm.
part. So I always felt to myself, okay, just do your part. And the same thing with cancer. I'm like, okay, throw everything because I tell people all the time, I'm a board certified wellness coach, but I tell people all the time, healing doesn't always occur in the chemo bed, doesn't always occur in the medical
Mhm.
office. Healing occurs in mysterious ways. It's our job to align to that healing, find it, ups and lows and lefts and rights, because that's the key. And so I made that a mission. So I said, okay, as long as I do that, and that's when I was diagnosed July 2014. I did the 6 rounds plus the whole bunch of integrated modalities because I believe in body autonomy. And so 5 days before Christmas, December of that same year, I got my remission status. And this past December of 2023, it's been 9 years. This July of 2024, it will be 10 years since I got diagnosed. So I'm
Mm.
doing my part to just keep what I need to keep close, what the
Mhm.
lessons I learned. Because even then, I knew to myself, I'm like, seventh floor cancer floor, what's the connection that we all share? I know we have different cancers, but I know we're all from different walks of life, but what's the soul connection here between all these
Something.
people? There's something here. And even though I could put my finger on it, I'm like, I want to understand. I want to stay curious in this. And but I actually got a really great lesson, and I'll share because you probably would appreciate this.
Mm.
My last roommate came in, and he was just not a nice, was just not a happy camper. He was yelling
Yeah.
at the nurses, screaming at the doctors.
Yeah.
And when they left, I asked him, I'm like, can I ask you a question? I'm like, I don't want to interfere, but it's like, you have radiation tomorrow. They say you have to come in tomorrow. Why do you want, because he wanted to leave. He wanted to like get out. Like, why do you want to leave? And he's like, my dog's home. And I'm like, but you're here, the hospital. You're here to get better. You have a radiation appointment. And so, he left the room and did his thing and whatever. And then I talked to that good friend. She's like, Savio, you don't get it. I'm like, what do you mean? She goes, he thinks he's going to die. You have
Yeah.
a different perspective. You're like already thinking about a vision. You're thinking about what you're going to do. He thinks he's going to die. And I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, what a great lesson to learn about compassion and
Mm.
empathy in
Yep.
that moment. Because it wasn't about me. It was about the experience.
That's right. Yeah. Being able to see the context, like what he was thinking and believing, his behavior made sense.
Exactly. Absolutely. So
Mm.
I got some beautiful gems and nuggets, and that formed the impetus of everything else that I do, which is all the other things that my name is ascribed to, which is beautiful that I've achieved those things. But I always tell people all the time, I'm still Savio. I've just made this something that I feel like could resonate to other people, because I think my journey says something. And if I can inspire others to realize that by going in, because it's always an inside job, you can go external. You can actually create from that
Mm-hmm.
pain into purpose.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. For sure. And that it sounds like there was some pressure initially around this, like, oh, I didn't do what I was supposed to do. Do you, in the like, I heard you say, I'm wanting to stay connected to the lessons. I'm wanting to like continue to let it be present in my life so it informs, my current steps. Is there any continued pressure around like, I need to make sure I do my purpose now, or
So two things ring to me at the moment. So I'll share with you. I got a message from someone who's really gifted right before my cancer. And the message was, only the truth shall set you free. And this was right before my cancer, before I even knew about my cancer.
yeah.
So that was weighing on me. And I'm like, it could mean so many different things in so
Mm,
many different ways.
mm,
And so when I got my remission status, I just didn't know what to do. I had 5 years, because they say 5 years is the typical time frame that the cancer may not show up again.
right.
It's not a guarantee. Most likely it's less to appear. Okay. So I just didn't want to start something and cancer is back, and I'm going to be a hypocrite talking about overcoming cancer when cancer just came back. I know that's not the
Um,
way it typically should be, but that's the way I was thinking in my head. So
yeah.
5 years passed, and I was just really lost. And I ended up attending a men's retreat.
Mm,
And it was so beautiful, because that people don't know about men's work. It's about the fact that men have to rise up in the wake of the Me Too movement, and the fact that women are getting more empowered and more, they deserve those rights. And it was 18 men in the Catskills of New York. And we did something beautiful called eye gazing, which I've never done with another man.
oh
Even though I'm a gay
yeah.
man, I've never done that.
Yeah.
And staring at another man, and they're all, I would say, except for me and maybe someone else, everybody else was a straight male. And doing that, and then we did an exercise where we touched each other's hearts with our hands, and then our heartbeats sort of were in
Sync
sync a
up.
little bit, which is so
It's
odd.
so cool.
But to see these men express themselves through crying, yelling, fear, shame, like everything was expressed in that weekend. It was so beautiful that I came away thinking to myself, if I can allow myself to feel that and be that, then I can allow myself to create. And so I ended up getting my board certification, means nothing, but ICF certification, gold standard of coaching. I did ended up going on a choo-choo train, University of Pennsylvania. I did all these certifications because that's just how I roll, like I mentioned earlier. And then I pitched an idea to my editor. So I was always a writer. And I'm like, can we do something about my community? He's like, okay. And so he thought of a great title. I survived cancer. Here's how I did it. At this point, Z, I've interviewed 200 cancer survivors, different walks of life. And then he came to me. He's like, okay, this needs to be a book. So we launched a book. I did an audiobook companion, the same title, I Survived Cancer. Here's how I did it. And the day before my birthday became a bestseller in 4 categories, which that's great to have the accolade, but to me, it was about, oh my God, the hope. Because I made sure that each person in the book, the 35 stories that I chose, all had a QR code with their website, not because I wanted them to promote themselves, but I wanted people to see that they're living, they're surviving, and they're thriving. They're actually doing things with that happened to them, that this isn't the end of their story, that their story can be amplified and magnified. And so that's the work. And maybe I feel to a degree that cancer allowed me to express these areas of my life. And then, as you know, this past October in Raleigh, North Carolina, I did my TEDx talk. I talked about my cancer, talked about my role as a journalist. I mean, I've interviewed celebrities like Venus Williams, and if you look at her, you're like, she's the epitome of sports. But yet she expressed that she has gastrointestinal issues, and that impeded her ability
Mm,
to perform. I
mm.
interviewed people like Carson Kressley, who was very fun, and Ice-T. And I've been on these trips like Italy and India with National Geographic this past December, 8 cities in India. And all that is just to say that if I didn't experience cancer,
Yeah.
none of this would happen. My editor wouldn't trust me to talk about illness and wellness and where that falls in the spectrum. So it's been a ride. It's been a ride. And funny enough, next Saturday is my 26th college reunion. So I'll see those
Um,
people, which is really, really fun. It's going to be fun.
you can go thank that guy for having his drag on that morning.
Yes, I will. I will. Yeah, hopefully he shows up. It it was because my mom called me the next day. She's like, "How's everything? You met your roommate? How's everything? Like, is he cool with the area?" And I'm like, "Yeah, mom, he's good. I met him for a few minutes." That's all I could tell her. I couldn't tell
You're
her
like,
he came
let's
in.
FaceTime and I'll show you.
No, if I told her that, she would say to me, "Are you looking for a different roommate?"
Bless her. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Uh, well, my friend recently, and it was actually he's my accountability partner, and
Oh.
he was on our last episode of the podcast, and he had this very vivid psychedelic experience where he had this analogy come forward: the knife cuts itself.
Ooh.
And as you were talking about how, like, the editor wouldn't have trusted you if you hadn't had the cancer, like all these different components of, like, I was in this spiritual community, but like I couldn't like shift that piece because of this like courage, and then the stomach, and like all it just all feels like it's like this knife cutting itself. Like we are engaged in some sort of a um guided, but like, I don't know, it just feels very like all the pieces are constantly reaffirming each other.
Yeah.
And in that way, for me, as I hear you talk, like none of these different twists or turns feel like they were like, oh no, I'm gonna align with my purpose, like I'm gonna come here to do something. It was like these moments where maybe it seems like a cutting, like something that is negative, like, oh, now I'm in this, Indian Catholic family and I'm gay. Like, why is that about? And like, oh, now I'm in this spiritual community and like I don't know how to be authentic spiritually in the context of something that's promoting my spiritual authenticity. And then like, oh, now I have cancer and now I want to help people, but maybe I'll be a hypocrite. Like all of these moments were giving you this, like, yeah, you're not really, like, I don't even have words, but just that essence of like, okay, you don't have to do something, like it's being done,
Yeah.
and you participating with it
Yeah.
feels like where this has become so powerful.
Yeah. Well, I knew that in those 5 years that I had to pause. I knew I couldn't just make a decision quickly. And maybe part of it was just, Paramahansa Yogananda, Autobiography of a Yogi, he talks about going into the sea of infinite bliss. He talks about moving in with the energy of the flow of the universe, like not forcing things, because at the end of the day, the universal energy of God, whatever that expression is guiding you or moving you to. But I'm like, if I force something, is it really guidance or is it my way or the highway? And I'm a I'm a pretty that type of a guy where like if I want to do something, I will put all efforts in. So I'm like, no, maybe the time for me is just to pause. Maybe the time for me is just to look inward. And maybe for once in my life, it's not about figuring out what's the next step, but maybe
Mhm.
it's about honoring the step I'm in. Maybe it's just
Mm.
about freezing for the moment. Maybe. So I didn't
Mhm.
know, but I do know when the ideas started rolling into my head, it felt right in my body. It felt right in my spirit. I felt alive. It lit me up. And I'm like, I think this makes sense. So beautifully accurate what you just said.
Yeah. Because purpose sounds a little
Yep.
should-ish, and inspiration sounds like what's been happening,
Yeah.
right? It's like, ooh, I want to do that. I'm like, ooh,
Yeah.
editor, how about this? And then
Yeah.
like, oh, how about this? And it's like, oh, I'm not like trying to get something done, right? I'm like, whoa, whoa, this is fun. This is fun.
Even people even ask me with my TEDx talk, they're like, oh, okay, that was just something to add to your credibility factor. I'm like, I guess so, but I'm like, honestly, I woke up in 2023 and being a journalist, I read the survey once that said that people fear two things, and they fear actually public speaking over death. I
Yeah.
faced the death part. So I'm like, well, what scares me? Oh, public speaking. And it's funny because people are like, what are you talking about public speaking? You do panels, you do think tanks, you do podcasts, you have a podcast. I'm like,
It's
no,
different.
yeah, it's a different animal standing up in front of people, especially talking about what happened to me, like
Yeah.
my cancer and what I've discovered from other people and what I've gleaned and what I know and my history. And it's not easy, but I did it. I faced it. I was one of, they only chose 10 people out of 300 plus applications, and they chose me to go first. And funny enough, I went there. I was the first person to go. I knew they told me a month or two before that I would be the first person. I go in, I do 1 minute of it, which you don't see on the TEDx talk, by the way.
Uh-huh.
I go in, and I do 1 minute, and they had mic issues. I'm like, okay. So I go back, they fix the mic issues. I do 2 minutes of it. The organizer comes down, they have mic issues. She runs down, she goes, thankfully, this isn't live stream. This is just filmed live, but it's not live streamed.
Oh my
The
God.
audience is over 200, might be 225 people in the audience, people I don't know. Raleigh,
So
North
you've
Carolina.
done your intro twice.
I did. So that happened. She's like, let's do it again. I go my third time. I do it. No mic issues. I do it. This guy comes after I finished because I was first person. So the 9 other talks had to
Yeah.
go. So after it's over, he comes to me. He goes, "Let me tell you something. What I saw was a baseball game." I'm like, "What are you talking about? This is like a regular dude." And he's like, "I saw strike one, not your fault. Strike two, not your fault. Strike three, hit it out of the park." He goes, "You were so good that you showed resilience before you talked about resilience, before your story." I'm like, oh my God, I didn't even realize it. And you know what I said to him, Z? I said to him, I said, I'm a New Yorker. I'm like, I've been through the dot-com crash, 9/11, my cancer journey, and also being gay. I'm
Yeah.
like, if they had me to do it 20 more times, I would have done it 20 more times. Not a problem.
Oh my God, I love that so much, because that again just demonstrates that you were like not doing it to like do something.
No,
You
definitely not.
were in it, and it was coming through you, and it was meant to come through you. And so, definitely I'm going to rewatch it because I want to be in the moment being like, "Oh, this guy has done this twice already and now he's starting again and
There you go.
everybody's heard the same phrases twice."
I did it. But you know what? I was like, that third time, I felt like, you know what? I felt like, to a degree, to be honest, I needed the energy of those two other times. I needed that.
For real.
I needed someone or something to be a barrier,
Yeah.
because that's all I've known is that I have to push through the barrier somehow, some way. Even if I have to
Yeah.
crawl through the barrier or go underneath the barrier, I will find a way to do it. And I will try to do
Yeah.
it. I might not succeed, but I'll try to do it. And so I did the best I could.
Yeah, the universe was like, this guy likes it to be a little bit challenging. So let's give you something to push off of.
I think so. I think so. I think so as well. And actually, people ask me because I actually joined a cohort because I wanted to make sure I knew what I was doing. So
Yeah.
these cohort I joined, like they put almost 400 people on the TEDx stage.
Wow.
And all the people that I was in like mini cohorts with were like, I already built my website and all. I'm like, I'm not doing any of that. I'm like, I'm just seeing where this goes. I'm baking the cake. Now the cake is baked. I want to see if people want it to eat it. I'm not thinking about all this other stuff. So I'm glad that for me, it felt organic. And
Yeah.
at the end of the day, and we can talk a little bit about it if you want, but my talk was really about leaving people with a call to action, right? Yeah, people have been through cancer, some people haven't. What's the takeaway from this talk?
Hmm.
My talk is called 7 Minutes to Wellness, How to Love Your Inner Stranger. What's the takeaway? So I coined something called the Aloha Reboot,
I
which
love the aloha. Yeah, mention it. I love it because I love acronyms. I don't know if you've ever heard of DBT, dialectical
I've heard
behavioral therapy.
I've heard of it. Yes, I have. Yes.
I'm fairly obsessed with it, but it's all acronyms. So when you said that, I was like, yes, an acronym. Okay, tell the people.
Sure. So in my search for healing, I uncovered a healing in Hawaii called Huna Healing. And of that, there's an offshoot called Ho'oponopono. But with TEDx Talk, to be very careful because everything has to be documented, especially health and wellness. They don't want to put anything that's, they're not going to put woo-woo stuff up there because they have to answer to some
Yeah,
higher force. So for me, I talked about Ho'oponopono, but in a very light way. And so I created the acronym called Aloha Reboot. So it's an acronym, as you mentioned. A stands for acknowledge. So acknowledge where you are. Don't pretend, don't falsify, just acknowledge.
that's my
L,
favorite one. Take a
yes,
moment for being real.
yep,
Yeah,
100%. And
radical acceptance is what they
that
call it
means
in DBT.
if that means breathing, prayer, meditation, put your feet on the ground to feel it, nature walks, humming, chanting, I don't care. Just acknowledge where you are. L is for listening. So listen to that inner voice. And Hula Healing, talk a lot about talking to different body parts. I don't suggest people do it in public. People might think you're weird. I have something that I use in my coaching, which is the three brains, head, heart, and gut, because there's anecdotal evidence that says that vibrates energy and consciousness, that there's a
Sure
knowingness there.
does.
And people will say yes or no. But if you think about it, how do we buy? We buy with emotions. Yeah, we like brands, but why do we like them? We like them because it makes us feel a certain way. So definitely do that. O stands for opening. Very important, especially after interviewing 200 cancer survivors. At this point, I've interviewed over 2,000 thought leaders in the space of longevity and resilience and fear of failure. It's this idea of opening yourself up to self-compassion and self-forgiveness,
Yeah,
which is the cornerstone of Ho'oponopono. It's really about saying to yourself, I'm sorry, please forgive me, thank you, I love you.
I love
So
you.
that's a big thing. H stands for harnessing. So harness that wisdom that you accumulated. And A, the biggest of all is that inspired action. Take that inspired action. And so I call it 7 minutes to wellness because it's a 7-minute practice that you can do
Mm,
in and of yourself. And it allows you to go so deep within yourself because the more you build on that, the more it grows, is that you allow yourself to feel like you can create and you can conquer because the external world holds many challenges for us, but I think a lot of our pain and sorrow comes from unresolved issues from the internal world.
I totally agree. Do you know Byron Katie at all?
I do. I do know Byron
Yeah.
Katie.
Yeah. Her quote about um that if I were thinking and believing what you were thinking and believing, I would do the exact same thing. Her whole premise is all suffering is about what we're thinking and believing. And I totally agree with you. And I love that aloha one. I definitely think it's a very like acronyms are so sweet because it's not this big complicated thing, right? And like you said, it sounds like you give like 1 minute to each of them. Yeah.
100%. Yeah.
And so is that something that you find has just like become integrated that you're sort of like always alohaing, or do you have like an aloha time for yourself still?
So my aloha reboot in and of itself is just it goes in and out of just the different. It's probably not even called aloha. It's called many different things. But for the individuals that I coach individuals that have overcome some type of medical adversity and they want to be leaders and tell their story and just amplify their impact and create that new version. It's so simple for them because they're like, oh, I don't have to be in lotus position and meditate for 10 minutes. Like I can't even do that. I'm like, no, just breathe into the different body part. Like I keep it so simple
Yeah.
because I think that's what people are looking for. As you know, we're inundated with content. I mean, I love my TikTok, to be honest. The algorithm is
Mhm.
so beautiful for me that it gives me content. And I'm like, beautiful. I don't have to search for this stuff. Of course, I vet it as a journalist, I have to vet it. And so for me, I make it easy because what does aloha really mean? It means hello to your inner
It's so
self.
so sweet. It's so cute. I just picture this like little guy with like big eyes being like, "Hi,
Yeah.
aloha, Aloha.
Exactly.
Hi. Could you pay attention to us? When I'm in sessions, I do something quite similar, which I just call it the body dialogue, just talking
Okay.
to your body.
Yep.
And without fail, like every time those little body parts are like, just with saying hi to them, they're like, did you just say hi to me? Like, oh my God, hi. And
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
they're never snarky. They're never like, you haven't talked to me in
Yep.
decades and like, fuck
Yep.
you, you know?
Yep.
They're,
Yep.
they're
Yep.
always
Yep.
like, hi. They're so happy to be acknowledged.
And you probably find this to be true, right? As you know, right? When we have those dialogues with our body, we then ask questions or prompts like, does it have a color? Does it have a shape? And
Exactly.
it's so interesting because if you think about it, the way they describe it is like a child would describe it. It's
100%.
not, they're not going to say it's a, like, tetrahedron. Like they're going to say like it
Yeah.
has like, shapes and rounded corners and edges
Yeah.
and sharp shapes.
Sticky
Like,
and spiky and yeah. Yeah.
so
It's
it's
so
just,
cool.
it's great. It's wonderful.
Ah, well, I am really glad that it sounds like have you had the opportunity to let go of that pressure of I have to do something, I have to
Right.
be something, and now you're allowed to live into that creativity and that inspiration and be there for whatever the body brings, even when the body brings funky or scared or sad or ashamed. And what a we're back to where we started. Just what an incredible miracle that the two of us have had this opportunity to experience this level of freedom
Yeah.
on so many levels. I mean, just in the sense of like having the opportunity to come out and live into being queer, but to survive all the different layers of having a human body and to be able to play a little bit. I
Yeah.
feel just really happy for you. I'm so grateful that you're
Thank you.
having this opportunity.
Yeah. I think this leads me to what I would really like for people to try to understand is we probably don't get to choose some of the horrible things that happen to us, but we get to choose how to respond.
Mm,
And we get to choose what it is that we want to take away from something and what do we want to keep and what do we want to let go of. Because I truly believe that for me, what has sustained my ability to keep innovating or keep moving forward is my ability unknowingly or unconsciously to catch and release. Because
mm,
the two tenets that I try to really work on is this idea of this empty pot, coming to a conversation with empty pot. And people like you and me, right, who are like learned it and trained, and we want to make sure it's right. Like, you don't want to fuck it up. And so, but when you come into that conversation with someone with that empty mind, it's so beautiful because it's like this new fascinating thing. Like I had a client and I asked him a question in a coaching session. I said to him, I said, because, he mentioned he was a latchkey kid in Australia. And he mentioned, he would watch TV a lot, to keep himself entertained. And I'm like, what show did you watch? And he thought it was so strange. He's like, what? Okay. He's like, that's a weird question. He even stopped the coaching part and he's like, what's a strange question? And he's like, I used to really love commercials. And he realized that he became an ad agent, like an ad executive, because yes, it was the commercials. They gave him comfort. He was
yeah.
able to be seen. He was able to relate. And he wanted to get away from that identity. He wanted to create something new. That was what we talked about. And it was a flash of insight. I would have never asked that question normally. And that came from that empty mind. And the
Yeah.
second thing is really a beautiful thing that wasn't even coined by me. It's this idea that you can't pour from a pot that's full. You have to let go of the waters that are in there in order to fill new, refreshing things in there. So new ideas, new inspiration, new being, new wonderfulness. So,
Oh, that's so beautiful. Thank you.
sure.
I love it. I feel like these conversations and sessions with folks, it's like I'm just like reading the most interesting book and I never know what's going to happen on the next page. That's
Yeah.
like why I don't give people talking points or make it super structured because I'm like, oh, I don't want to read the end before I get there. Like I
Yeah.
just want to see what happens in this book. And thanks for giving me that opportunity today.
Thanks for allowing me to give. And people are like, God, you talk a lot about emotions and the body and feelings and all that. And I'm like, Yeah, I'm like, oh, you want the science? So you want to talk about positive psychology and how you can manage the
You're
situation
like, I
despite
can
the
do that too
challenges?
if you
You
want.
want
Yeah.
self-regulation? You want to talk about how you can regulate, but we can talk about that as well. But I think at the end of the day, what do people mostly care about? They care about how do I fix this problem?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, let's make it
Yeah.
simple.
I just want to feel better. Yeah.
Yeah.
Speaking of the science, a few comments ago, you said something about the mind, body, gut.
Yeah.
And I was curious, have you read The Mindful Body by Ellen Langer?
Yes, I have. Yeah.
Oh my God, I love her so much because those experiments that she does are hilarious
Yeah.
because they're just like so obvious. Like the one, do you remember where they put people in a room and they were like, imagine having a cold, and then they
Oh,
played a video of like someone sneezing and they put tissue and chicken soup on the table, and
yeah.
a week later like 90% of them had a cold.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah. I mean, that whole social support theory in general, where people gravitate towards things that are socially, let's say, acceptable or things that other people,
Or even just happening, like the
it,
stuttering.
yeah, 100%. It's fascinating because I think to a large degree, individualism, right? If shown, is terrifying. It
Yeah.
just is. And
Yeah.
there are people who want to break free from that, and that's their identity. But I think the key there is, like you said, to try to experiment and be curious and see what sticks and see what
Yeah.
doesn't.
Okay. Well, what do you want to tell the people about how they can connect with you, your book, whatever?
So really simple. They can go to my website. So it's my name, Savio, Savio. P is my middle initial, Clemente, Clemente. I actually do it's like a weekly newsletter community. So I covered the red carpet, the Oscars a few weeks ago in LA, and
That's fun.
I wrote about what belonging. So I said, do I belong in a sea of Hollywood's elite? Even though I'm press and vetted and all that stuff, do I belong in a sea of Hollywood's elite? And what I realized, Z, and you would appreciate this because this is how you think, I noticed that celebrities were acting on the red
Yeah.
carpet. They're acting for themselves, for
Mhm.
the managers, for us, the press. So who's the real person in that, right? Because they have to show a certain facade. But I want to write about it in my own way so they could read those things. I talk about my own three brains, head, heart, and gut in different iterations. They can go to I think I have 2 coaching spots left for my 90-day program. So it's for any individual who's faced medical adversity in order to them get themselves to just really tell and amplify their impact and overcome some of the things that are binding to them.
Very cool.
They can also see my TEDx talk there as well. And on social media, I'm at every social media handle at The Human Resolve.
The Human Resolve. And we'll put all that good stuff in the description. I want to
Okay.
read that one about the red carpet. That sounds
Yeah,
fun.
read it. Read it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was honest. That's all you can do.
Oh, that's your gift now, is that you get to be honest.
Yeah.
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 What a
And
true
I
privilege.
get to have these experiences that would have never happened if I just went the way that I did. But I do believe that you can either embrace what has happened to you or you can allow it to eat you up. And I've just decided that I would embrace it. I don't know where the story will end, but at least I have a clear conscience and said that I did the best that I could.
Yeah, I feel like all roads probably lead to the same place. So I feel like maybe next round I'll come and just be like super curmudgeon-y and like just like let it eat me alive. And
Yeah,
like that's probably a cool experience too, you know? Like I want to taste all of the flavors.
yeah, yeah. I hear you, but this has been a truly wonderful conversation. Thank you so
Ah,
much.
absolutely. Okay, I'm gonna end the recording and
Okay.
then